Hi, this is Renaud Anjoran from Sofeast, and I'm going to cover how to manage product compliance throughout the NPI process. Just a few words about me. I've been in the new product development and manufacturing industry for more than 15 years. And first, I want to go through 3 examples of companies that get in trouble because of product compliance issues, so that really people here who view the video can understand, and really relate to what we're going to cover. So first example is a electric scooter made in China, and it's been recalled by the European Union. And you can see, here's the photo that they show on their website of the European Union. It's supposed to be CE, obviously. This kind of device falls under several directives like RoHS, EMC, etc., LVD, probably RAD, which includes the previous 2. So this is CE. They also show FCC, which is irrelevant here because we're talking about the EU. They also show this sort of RoHS logo, which, by the way, means nothing in terms of compliance. So this is very good to attract the attention of the market surveillance authorities, because the RoHS directive is a CE marking directive. Never says that there should be a RoHS logo. So this really says, hey, we don't know anything about compliance, right? So let's see from the RAPEX website of the European Union. What is the problem? A lot of lead. Up to 55% by weight, which is really amazing. So it doesn't comply with the RoHS directive, stop of sales, right? So it's really a recall, mandatory recall. Example number 2 is this Peloton bike. And you can see it's 2.2 million units that are being recalled for repair. That's in the USA. All right, and Peloton is a huge company, and this is from May 2023. A huge company. They have more than 6 million members who are doing things and paying the company. And this has been a massive success. This company grew very fast over the past 10 years. And so what's the problem? This is from the CPSC, this U.S. Government Bureau, and they say 13 reports of injuries, including a fractured wrist, lacerations, bruises, etc. So people can fall from the bike and really hurt themselves. So this is simply failing to think of the use of the product and doing proper use testing, maybe some reliability testing, etc. And a proper risk analysis. Example number 3 is a bit special. So it's this kind of underwear for period, for women when they have a period. So it includes some extra material, basically to absorb. So what is the problem here is that some people tested it and they found that there are some PFAS, basically chemicals that enter the body and will sort of never leave the body. So this actually does not pose any problem when you look at compliance requirements, right? Even though this is actually now classed as a medical device, this kind of period underwear, but that they did not have a problem specifically with the US FDA or anything like that. What went wrong is that they were saying, the brand messaging was saying that it was non-toxic, and it was written everywhere. Oh, it's safe, it's blah blah blah, natural, it's non-toxic, etc. And people say, well, there are some of these substances, and these substances, there's some other research that was done and says that these forever chemicals, can lead to cancer and so on. And the company had to pay a lot of money to some of their previous customers, right? So the brand messaging also is very important. It has to be consistent with what the product is. So these were 3 examples. Now let's look at how does all that come into play in the NPI process. And first, what is the NPI process? New product introduction, right? So I have a couple of graphs just to clarify this. This is for general electromechanical products, all right? Non-medical, because there's some extra things, but usually for medical devices that are electromechanical, it's also automotive products. It's more or less the same approach. There's just a number of extra steps. Okay. So the idea is that first you plan and you work on the specifications, and then you do maybe a feasibility study, you get to a proof of concept, you work through prototypes, different iterations, then you go into DVT and tooling and make sure that the appearance of design is really validated, and then you do pre-production runs, what they call production validation testing, etc., until it's okay and it goes into mass production, right? So the NPI process is basically the whole process around here, okay, and all along quality and reliability, have to go up, and the number of pieces made obviously also goes up. Okay, this is why this arrow is up and to the right. And we drew this graph, I believe, last year, and these are the typical things that go into these 6 phases. Okay, I'm not going to go through all of this, but usually when you look at this from a high level perspective, you think, okay, certifications for compliance. Usually when you have the parts off of tooling, you do an engineering build, and then that's maybe the time to send for certification. Or maybe you wait a little bit later during pre-production. Maybe it will not delay things for mass production, right? So certifications for compliance, that's usually what most people have in mind, but it's really way insufficient. Okay, so what I really wanted to cover now is, so when should compliance be taken into account all along the NPI process. Okay, so it actually starts from the very beginning. Okay, plan, you see, before you start to do anything. Actually, what type of products should we do based on maybe the management systems we have in our company, based on the experience we've had, etc., for what market, and what kind of product for what market can we develop and manufacture. So if maybe you've been working mostly on simple consumer electronics, maybe a Bluetooth speaker or something like that, you're not going to jump straight into medical devices for the USA and Europe, right? Because you're going to have a ton of extra requirements. Manufacturing partners may not be certified to ISO 13485, may not be able to support you through all the regulations. And then you, even internally, as you do some of this work, will have to do a lot of extra work. Okay, so what kind of product for what market? You really need to be clear about that before you start to say, okay, let's do this kind of new product. Okay, don't go too fast, and I will get back to this topic. Okay, then you say, okay, this is the product. Okay, let's be clear on what the compliance requirements are. All right, for each of the markets, for example, USA, Canada, Australia, let's say European Union. Okay, what exactly is required? And sometimes you have to go like country by country. For example, for food contact requirements in the EU, it has not been harmonized. So you really need to do a lot of research sometimes to know exactly, okay, the product will have to comply to all of that. And you have to start from the beginning, but all the way through have some kind of risk analysis and mitigation activity. Okay, it's really important to think, okay, what are the risks, this, okay. And then as you make progress, you refine your previous risk analysis, and then you see some new risks, okay, and then you add them to the risk analysis and mitigation, right? So for example, you develop a sort of a in-apartment bike, like that Peloton bike, and maybe when you do the prototypes, you might, maybe an engineer will say, well, what about, if people get really active and then they sort of miss the handlebar and then they fall, where would they land? What could happen, right? This is sort of typical use, where you start to put it in people's hands, you get some user testing, and you really observe them, and you really update the risk analysis. And mitigation means you actually need to sort of go back to the design if there's really high risk, high hazards that are identified, and maybe make some changes to it. Okay. Now, during development, there are basically two groups of people who will be very involved with compliance. Designers, they have to base the design on either the requirements, maybe requirements from the governments, regulations and such, maybe from big customers, maybe from distribution partners, insurance companies, right? Depending on the cases. So all of these requirements have to be put together, and the designers need to be very clear on that. and good practices such as, I don't know, if there's a battery, maybe IEC 62133. If it's like a Bluetooth speaker, IEC 168, I believe, -1, etc. Right? There are usually some voluntary standards that can really guide the designers. Okay, for example, if the battery really overheats and catch fire, okay, will the enclosure actually contain the fire, right? This is just one simple example. Okay, and then sourcing and procurement actually is very involved here, very, very involved, as they pick the components to be used in prototyping. They will need to pick some components, maybe some modules that are pre-certified. That can really help a lot in reducing the cost of testing and certifications of the whole product at that stage. Okay, there's a lot to it. I cannot cover everything, but really designers and sourcing and procurement people will have to be very, very involved. Then what everybody kind of has in mind, testing and certifications, yes, very important. You might test earlier, for example, for electromagnetic compatibility, see if there's leakage and so on. You don't have to have the full final product. It can be on a product, maybe on in a 3D printed enclosure, for example, or even just looking at the PCBA. Okay, and then you have like really the proper certification by the authorized testing body, etc., etc. Okay, and then you actually, when you keep going, you keep doing some testing to confirm that something hasn't changed, in a deep way compared to the product that you sent for certification. This is very important. Also, lot to lot in mass production. You don't want to keep making some batches of mass production, and maybe one of the key components change in its design, or maybe one of the materials or something changed, right? Or maybe in the assembly, or anything changes, the whole product might behave very differently. So a little bit of testing doesn't have to be full testing, very deep testing every time, but this is really important. Okay, and then also something that people kind of forget is that once the product is on the market, you need to do a little bit of post-market surveillance. You need to log the complaints, you need to see if there's any trends, you need to see what the main failures are, and so on, right? Also, failure analysis. If there's something really concerning, for example, some people say, well, it really overheated and there's like a burn mark or something. Oh, send us the samples. You need to do a structured failure analysis. That's really, really important. Okay. Archival of technical files, so basically all the design files, the test reports, inspection reports, data sheets about key components and so on have to be together, and you need to keep it in case something goes wrong, or in case you are audited by a market surveillance authority. And of course, follow up on updates in standards and regulations, because sometimes, maybe now is 2023 as I'm shooting this video, and there's this maybe EN standard for the EU that is in place, and you must comply with it in order to have what they call presumption of conformity. And maybe in 2 years it will be discontinued and there will be a new standard. Well, you can't just keep making the same product in the same way, based on the old standard. You basically have to retest. And this is just to answer the question. Some people will say, well, what about small or new companies? There's no way they can do all of this, right? Well, I would say there's no way that they can directly go into a highly regulated industry like medical devices, maybe in-vehicle automotive parts, maybe products for mining, etc., right? No, of course not. You start simple. You have low exposure to cost of poor quality, so if you do something wrong, it's not going to kill you. You do it in a space that's very mildly regulated, let's say, right? And then you put in place a minimum viable quality management system, and then you do a better and better quality management system, and then you learn how to manage risk better and better, and then maybe you do one product, one complicated development in a regulated industry. You take your time, you do it really by the rules, and then as you get better at that, then you can really get to sort of the top of the staircase here. But you don't try to jump right away. You really need to plan for small jumps one by one. Okay, I hope this was helpful. please, you can comment on the video on YouTube, or you can send us some messages, some comments. We're always happy to get feedback from the viewers. Thank you very much.